Network.
All right, let's bring everybody up on stage at once, because I'll probably forget your names anyway, and that way I don't have to like introduce you one at a time. But we've got Creature Comforts, and we've got Matt Brindleson and Eric Ponce from Firestone Walker. That's right, and we've got Adam Beecham and Blake Tyers from Creature Comforts, and all these guys did the collaboration beer, which I think is going around right now, right? Yeah, I see pictures out there. Lovely volunteers. A round of applause for them. The louder you cheer, the more beer you might get. Yeah. And then I'm just going to request that we get some beer too at some point. Because it's warm. We're warm like you are, and we all got into brewing and beer because we like drinking it. Let's be honest. All right, so we're going to talk today about the collaboration beer. And why don't we just start with Eric here. I know it's called Mother's Milk. But tell us how you got started. Why with Creature Comforts? I mean, I know they're handsome, but why did you choose them? And give us a little background on the beer.
Yeah, so Creature Comforts is a really standout brewery right now. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of them. I love what they're doing, and they were here last year. And this conversation, like a lot of collaborations come to be, conversations start to unfold once a few beers are getting poured, and we decided on doing the collaboration beer for Firestone Walker Invitational 2018.
Did you choose the style at that point too? Is that part of the conversation, or that came later?
Yeah, I'm going to pass the mic down and let Blake talk about that.
There we go.
How do we choose the style?
Yeah, I think we were tossing it around and we were like, okay, well, we want to brew a beer. Oh, yeah, lager beer. Hello? There we go. We decided we wanted to brew a beer that was going to be ready in a year, so aging in oak was something that was kind of a prerequisite, or something that could sit in a stainless tank for that long, but at Firestone, I don't think anything could sit in a stainless tank for that long. So we had to go into oak. So then had been recently messing around with kind of the voices of different barrels and how they work with different beers, and we certainly respect the hell out of the barrel program. Whoa. We respect what these guys do a lot. Hello. Hi. So we respect what the barrel program is doing at Firestone quite significantly. It's one of the most prolific in the country, in our opinion, and to be able to be a part of that and try to add something to the voice that would be different from what they do, but also within the same line of quality and paying attention to flavor. We kind of landed on something dark, something in a spirits barrel, and then we had been playing around with an imperial milk porter at our place and wanted to kind of, the one we made was like 8% at our house and not barrel aged, and then so we took it over here, took some of the ideas and really brought in some of the Firestone team to get us to dial it in and bring it to a new life and take it to Mother's Milk.
Yeah. Yeah, we had been doing, so we do a beer called Cocoa Bunny. That's a milk porter. That was kind of the genesis of that for us. We coconut, chocolate, and coffee. But we always felt that the beer underneath that was nice on its own. And, you know, imperializing and barreling something is kind of a natural tendency, I think, for a lot of brewers. So we just kind of took that and ran with it. I don't think you really touched on the rye whiskey barrels, but I assume we'll get to that, but really on a beer that's that sweet, having something to balance it back and then getting a little rye spice was sort of the idea. But, you know, super happy with it, so.
I think for these collaborations, especially with the invitation in mind, one, you already said it's a lot better for us if we brew it when people come to town and we can lay it down for 1 year and then package it for this event for release. So that works out really well. So putting it into Eric's program made a lot of sense. And the other part of it, and you know, I'm starting to come to realize this more and more through the collaboration process, is it's a lot better for us if we kind of provide the medium, so to speak, and allow the brewery, in this case, Creature Comforts, to come forward with a recipe, and that we don't meddle with it too much, because there's a lot of learning that happens, and in this case, we were using a lot of raw materials and water chemistry tricks that we either hadn't even thought of or just hadn't been exposed to yet. And then you see how that plays in your program, and it gets everybody talking in the brewery. I mean, we've all been buzzing about some water chemistry stuff and some of these cool new specialty malts that are in this beer. And then it's always going to have a little Firestone expression. We used our yeast. It sat in Eric's barrel program, although in brand new barrels that we'd never tried before, these Willet rye barrels. So for me, it's really exciting to taste it and go, wow, that came out of our program. And that's the fun part about it. So we're actually now going to brew with Cigar City here, Wayne, tomorrow. No, Monday. Sorry, Monday. And not tomorrow. And the same same process. Let somebody come forward with a recipe, a bunch of ideas, and then plug it into our kind of existing equipment and process, and it's a lot of fun.
So why a rye barrel? And how do you decide that anyway? There's so many different types of barrels. You got wine barrels here in the Central Coast. Bourbon, tequila. Is it based on the recipe? How do you end up choosing which type of barrel?
Blakey? Yeah.
I think recently we've kind of taken a look at it where the barrel isn't just a place where we're going to put the beer, but it's an ingredient. And it has its own flavor voice and something it's going to add. So we really try to build our beers based on the barrel. So generally speaking, I feel like bourbon brings sweetness to a beer, in addition to all the flavors around it, but a general sweet impression. Whereas rye, I think, generally presents with a spice and a little bit of a bitterness kind of attribute. So if we are going to put something in a bourbon, generally we do something more dry, maybe a little more roasty, a little more aggressive with a hop profile. And then we'll just let it age in there and soften up into a more sweet note. Whereas if we're going to put something in a rye, generally we will target a sweeter base that then will eventually get dried out perceptually wise. It's not actually going to ferment, but it starts to have some kind of structure based on that spice and that finish from the rye base. So with these guys being a milk porter base, it was inherently a sweet beer. It's probably one of the higher finishing gravity beers done at Firestone. And so to do that, we're like, okay, well, what's going to add that kind of structure and finish on it was the rye barrels, and that's really why we wanted to bring those in.
I think it's important that you think about it like an ingredient like that, because it's really going to add something. I got to spend a couple days at Jameson at the end of last year, which was like the best and worst decision I've ever made, because I was there for 2 days. And I went into where they make the barrels, and he had me, they were just repairing a barrel, and he had me stick my head down in there and smell it. And I came up, and he's like, yeah, it smells like whiskey, doesn't it? I said, yeah, it really does. It's like there's never been whiskey in that barrel ever. And so it's actually the whiskey that smells like a barrel, not the other way around. And I had never known that, right? So I just thought that the smell of whiskey was whiskey, and it's really not. It's the ingredient of a barrel. So I think it's important that you point that out. So describe some of the flavors you think that came out in this beer. And I assume you guys are enjoying it out there? Yeah, a little bit, barely. They kind of like it. You still need more?
Bring more beer.
I can't believe this crowd. You need more beer? I think they're probably grabbing pitchers back from where it is being poured, so hang tight. We'll get more in your glass. Yeah, so tell us a little more about the characteristics of it.
I'll do a little. Flavor, you can say so many words about flavor. It's like a vocabulary that is not my specialty, but I love this beer, and I will say it's difficult to conceptualize a beer that's going to end up where you want it to be in a year. Like to say, okay, it's going to be kind of sweet up front, some lactic, and then the rye spice is really going to round it out. Like it's an idea that you have. You don't really know if it's going to get there, but Firestone, I think, has a tremendous amount of control over their process and has done it with enough repetition to say, like, yeah, that's the idea. We can execute it. But yeah, it's going to start with a really full body and is that it? No, that's El Dorado, maybe.
I think they're placating them with El Dorado right now while we're waiting for pictures of the mother's milk. No, you're doing fine. You're doing the right thing.
You're doing great.
But we need mother's milk for sure. Oh, they won't give us any more? Do they know who I am? You told them?
Matt said.
I can't believe that. You guys got a little, right? I saw pictures going around. Okay. All right. So you guys came late. Don't yell at me. I saw you.
Turning on us.
It happens quick. You got to just fight back. Don't worry. They'll calm down. Don't worry.
Once you experience the beer, it's a little sweetness up front, but it's not too much. It's a rich beer, so we intended to finish around 12 Plato, which is what a pale ale might start at, basically. So that's the intention. But when you get some mid-palate roast, but being a porter, it's a little gentler on the roast, and really you finish with this beautiful barrel character that is somewhat unique in a rye. I don't think it's a super commonly used barrel, but it does have a spice component that really, for me, makes the beer balanced and enjoyable, and makes you actually want to drink more of it. So
I like beer like that.
Yeah. Balance is a funny thing. I mean, to make a balanced beer at a 12 Plato finishing gravity, inherently you would think that wouldn't be possible, but there are tricks that you can use to do it.
So what makes a high gravity beer like that more drinkable, makes you want another one, right? Because like you're saying, a lot of times you're either full or it's kind of cloying on your palate and you're not ready for more. What's the difference?
There is, I think there's some salt in this beer, which is kind of interesting. Salt is, it's not really in the flavor, but it electrifies your palate, quite literally. So it makes electrical signals pass over your tongue more quickly and intensifies flavor and makes it more enjoyable and maybe even savory. So that's savory can balance sweet a little bit. And then really the oak, with some tannin and some other components to kind of peel back that sweetness, it all works together to make this really, complex but unified sort of note that, I quite like.
Okay. Eric, do you want to tell us about the Eldorado, since that's what they're drinking now?
Okay. Yeah, we'll move on to the Eldorado. We're going to start with, I believe they're pouring you. So what we're doing here, we're doing kind of showcasing the barrel. We got the two beers you're going to be drinking next is the same base beer. It's like a blonde barley wine. And the first beer, the beer is aged in bourbon barrels, about 6-year-old bourbon. And then the second one is the same base beer that's going to be aged in some Jamaican rum barrels. And they've both matured in the barrel from roughly 12 to 13 months at this point. So we're just going to kind of showcase the same beer being matured in different types of spirit barrels and what the barrel is actually bringing forth to the beer. So the bourbon is the one you guys got in your hands right now. It's a pretty unique beer because you see a blonde ale, you think you might be drinking a lager or a pale ale, and then you get that flavor. You get a nice texture to it, and you get the bourbon characteristics. You get a little bit of pitted fruit, a little bit of cigar, a little bit of tobacco, and a golden ale, which is pretty unique. You don't see too much blonde ales being matured in spirit barrels. So this has always been one of my favorite beers that Firestone makes. And it's a good impression this is a good base beer that kind of shows the impression of the oak. That's why we wanted to pour this today. And the beer you're tasting today, we actually got them straight from the barrels this morning, so there's no carbonation in the beer because it's straight barrel samples. We were pulling barrel samples this morning to get you guys some fresh barrel-aged beer to kind of showcase the wood.
Very nice, yeah. So is that also why you chose this kind of unusual style, like you say, so that you could showcase the wood? A light blonde beer?
Definitely. Okay. You don't have a lot of the roasted malts that kind of showcases the chocolate, roast, coffee, the traditional characters you get from the malts. On addition to the oak, this one, it's a blonde-based beer with some texture, higher gravity, but it really brings itself to be influenced by whatever spirit barrel you're using to kind of showcase that flavor. So it's pretty unique.
Yeah. And then you said they're aged, about a year, too. It's real hot here in Paso. I'm curious if you have to temperature control these barrels, too, or can you just kind of let them go?
So with our spirit barrel program here in Paso, we get extreme temperatures. That's why it's such a great grape growing region, because it does get really cold at night and extremely hot. So within our program, we do keep our spirit barrel age program at a temperature control year round, and that gives us a little more control, a little more predictability, and it allows us to control exactly what we want from the extraction of the wood throughout the year.
Got it.
Yeah.
I was just at, realizing I have a problem, I was just at Jack Daniels also. What is going on here? And we were talking about them aging their barrels too, and they don't temperature control their warehouses because they want the liquid to move in and out of the barrel as as winter and summer hits. So I'm just curious, what's the difference? Were you guys liking to keep it steady?
I mean, I think we just philosophically, or when I first started the Spirits Barrel program, and actually I talked a lot with Todd Ashman from 50/50, formerly of Flosmore Station, and he really believed in trying to mimic what the bourbon barrel or bourbon producers were doing. So he really wanted to see that temperature flux and seasonal variability. And I noticed when you taste those beers, you taste much more of the effects of oxidation. So you get more, I think you get stronger barrel notes, and that's the plus. And a lot of people love that. But for my palate, I get a lot of sherry. I get a little more of the soy sauce. I get a little more of the savory. And so our program, we decided to actually really chill it down. And so we're at 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees C. And that's a lot colder than a lot of people. That's even colder than a lot of wine cellars. And it slows down the extraction, so maybe they're not as intense, but we lose the sherry and we lose the soy sauce notes. So that's kind of a signature of the Firestone program. I was going to tell the story of Eldorado, though. So we have this winemaker blending program that's our anniversary beer every year. And we bring, we're here in Paso Robles area. There's more than 300 wineries just in the northern part of this county. And so there's this limitless source of just this wealth of information, fermentation scientists that are working on blending all the time. And so we tapped into that with our program, and we invite winemakers in to blend our anniversary beer every year. And it's this beautiful program because we just step back and they produce the beer for us. And what we realized over time is that the beers were getting darker and darker and darker. So Eldorado was actually a response to the blending program. We were trying to introduce a lighter beer to try to give them a little more flexibility color-wise, and also just to give them a very, very different beer. We never thought we would release it on its own. And the story goes is I was with my grandfather, who was probably 90 years old at the time, in Tombstone, Arizona. And I was thinking about this beer in the back of my mind as I was having a beer with my grandpa in this, like, near the OK, or what is it, the?
OK Corral.
OK Corral, it's like this cowboy town. I'm with my grandpa, and he's like, takes him a really long time to get into the bar, and I got a lot of time to think. And I'm looking around, and there's this sign. There's a festival in Tombstone called Eldorado. And I was like, I'm making this blonde barley wine, which is like Helles in Germany. And so we named it, and we were using Eldorado hops. So I'm like, Eldorado, it didn't work, man. That's
Thank you for naming my beer for me, weird western town. Adam and Blake, how do you guys keep oxygen out of barrels?
We actually, when starting our barrel program, I looked up to these guys a lot. So we take some page out of their notes. We keep our barrels also chilled and constant temperature year-round. We do a little bit warmer. We keep it between around 60 degrees. I do about 5 degree swings with the temperatures, or with the seasons outside, just to have moderate flexibility in and out of the wood. But obviously that's nothing significant. Like, you certainly see some folks that are happy to get it quite warm and quite cold. And we just found, that's what we started doing, and it kind of plays into it. Once you start doing it, then you have an idea of what happens over that certain amount of time. So we maintain that pretty consistently, so that that is a variable we can control. And that's basically what we do. Long term, we also try to incorporate some aging and antioxidative, or oxidative, yeah.
It works.
Thing, yeah, exactly. We'll make up words. Everybody knows what I'm saying. Traditional curing techniques, if you think about smoke, salt, roasted grains, all things have antioxidative properties, and so we use a little bit of salt in a lot of these beers. In addition to the flavor enhancing, it's also a curing agent. We'll put in like a bag of smoked malt to also help preserve our beers a little bit, not to mention just like normal cellar practices to keep oxygen out. Just kind of think about, like, okay, we're building a beer to be good in a year and a half or 2 years. Let's make it to stay that way. And also learned actually from hearing Matt on the Brewing Network talking about the nice plug for everyone. talking about the degradation of IBUs over time. And we use that a lot, certainly in our barrel-aged beers, where we'll do extremely high amounts of low alpha acid hops to get very high IBUs to make a beer that tastes terrible on day one and hopefully tastes great at like month 19. And so over time, that bitterness drops out and becomes a supportive agent to antimicrobial actual structure to the beer, balance to any sweetness that may come from like the bourbon barrel, things like that.
Yeah, that's what I really wanted to know, because it seems impossible to me that you can have a beer in barrels for that long and not have it turn out oxidized. Brewers spend hundreds of thousands, you might even correct me on that number, hundreds of $1,000s on bottling equipment, making sure it's the absolute lowest amount of oxygen into this beer. Yet you put it in a porous vessel with probably an air gap at the top of it, or at least one is created over time as the barrel absorbs it, and you still somehow give me beer that doesn't taste oxidized at the end.
I think you get some oxidative flavors. They're, in my mind, like, I'm very averse to the full-on, sherry, plum, prune stuff. But like, when you get like a really nice bright cherry note in a stout, that's typically some oxidation that's gone on. That's like one of my favorite flavors. It's unbelievably complex chemistry that's going on. I don't think anybody pretends to have ultimate control over that. But if you have repeatability, you can get the right flavors. I mean, in 19 months, you are going to have some oxidative flavors, but hopefully it's not all the way done to complete sherry. Another funny thing that I observe in oxidation, there's some studies, or you give people oxidized beer versus very fresh beer, and an uneducated, completely like just person off the street, it's 50-50 on preference. So, we all think fresh beer is the best, and that's what our consumers want, but a lot of consumers are very used to oxidized beer, and if you give them fresh beer, like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. What did you do?
Yeah.
One of the first big beer events I went to when I started the Brewing Network was the Toronado Barley Wine Festival, and I had never had a barley wine before, and somebody pulled out, 15-year-old bottles of J.W. Lee's and all that, and I thought they were amazing. I thought they tasted amazing with all the sherry notes and cherry, and then I had like a fresh barley wine. I realized they were terrible. It was all oxidative flavors, but there was a place for them. I mean, in those beers, but they were clearly like past their expiration date.
Right.
What about the degradation of hops over that time? Do you guys account for that? You got a beer sitting in a barrel for 12 months. Does it have to be a low alpha, a low hopped beer because of that, or how do you account for that?
Well, I think we touched on it a little bit, that you're going to see the IBUs, the measurable bitterness, so that would be isoalpha acid along with other components that make that up, degrade over time. And that's probably oxidative breakdown. And some of it can be that it settles out with some of the proteinaceous materials that are breaking down over time through oxidation. So I guess what we were saying is that you can go, Parabola, for instance, goes into a barrel above 80 IBUs and comes out less than half of that. After a year of aging. So, maybe that is helping protect the beer a little bit. It's definitely what we witness as we watch it go. And most of the beers that we're building, and again, this is more our particular philosophy, but it seems to play out pretty well, is we don't really go for a lot of finishing hops or dry hops or anything like that. We're using a lot of noble hops, German tradition, Styrian Golding, American Willamette, hops like that. And a lot of early additions, not a lot of late additions in our barrel program, because we know that those hop oils oxidize and create some off notes that we're not necessarily looking for in our finished beers.
But you need the hops sort of as a preservative, because I guess what I meant was, why not just put very little hops in so you don't have to deal with this degradation? I
mean, you could probably put a product like Flex or just ISO or CO2 extract very early in to get the isoalpha acid for the antimicrobial effects and some of the other preservative effects. And I guess in our program, what we're trying to do is eliminate real high oil content in the finish that would otherwise make off flavors through oxidation.
Do we have the rum barrel beer still ready to pour, or did all of that go out?
I don't think they've run it out.
You got one more?
One more beer?
The Eldorado in rum barrels? Let's do that. You guys want to try that, right? So do I,
Talk about it, Eric?
by the way. Just saying.
Matt, you want to rotate out, son?
So rum barrels are a particularly strong type of flavor, aren't they? I'm curious about how you might have to act differently putting your beer in a rum barrel.
Oh yeah, you guys want to try some?
Oh yeah. All right.
We're going to take a 30-second break while we fill glasses.
There we go.
Does anybody remember the Tom Petty Full Moon Fever album? Where it was one of the first albums on CD, and he stopped in the middle and he said, we're going to take a quick pause for those of us still listening on records and cassette tapes for them to get up, turn it over. Thank you. Here's side 2.
It's boozy, right?
Wow, that's a rum barrel.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, talk to us about this, Eric.
Yeah, I was pretty excited when we got these rum barrels in. I mean, so rum barrels with bourbon, you always know you're going to get a good bourbon barrel because by law, bourbon needs to be aged in new American oak for one use. So when they get rid of the barrels, you're getting a nice quality barrel, nice and tight. But a lot of other other spirit barrels purchase the bourbon barrels and they reuse them until they figure that's not going to hold any liquid. So we buy scotch barrels, we buy rum, we buy tequila, and you get these barrels in and they're pretty much falling apart sometimes. I mean, because these other distilleries put them at a place where it's not going to be holding product. So I love getting these barrels for the reason that the flavor we get out, but they can be a pain in the butt because you get these barrels in, and unlike our wine barrel program, we don't rinse or we don't hydrate them. We put them with beer as soon as we get them in at the brewery.
The rum barrels too?
The rum barrels too.
Because you just described them as like a total piece of shit.
I mean, they can be. We've had some instances where it takes a couple of weeks to a month to keep filling it with beer until they actually hydrate and hold liquid.
Wow.
And it's a mess. It's a pain in the butt. It smells good. The brewery smells phenomenal, but we're constantly scrubbing and making sure everything's clean. So these rum barrels are from Jamaica. We can't say the name of the distillery, but there's really pretty much one predominant distillery in Jamaica that's making some really good high-quality product. And what they do in Jamaica is most bourbon barrels, most barrels in general, have the head bung that are mature on racks horizontally. What the rum distilleries do, they don't really want to buy racks. What they do is they put them on their heads, and they drill a 2-inch head bung on the head, and they put 4 of them on a pallet, and they shrink wrap them. And they stack these things as high as the tree. That's pretty dangerous.
I love how rum is still like this pirate drink.
It's a pirate drink.
Can't spend money on racks.
I mean, you go to one of these distilleries, and you see the guys climbing these racks, and it looks like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. They're going every which way. So anyway, we get these barrels in. They're ex-bourbon barrels. Luckily, we have a really good supplier that brings these in on cargo ships straight from Jamaica. They come straight to our brewery. We created a little device that we use. It's in-house. It's a stainless steel strap that we screw in over the head bung, and we put them on there on racks.
Okay.
And we fill them up, and we actually get these barrels in, and they still have a good amount of uncut rum in there. I mean, the brewery smells amazing when we pop these bungs open.
And you leave that in there?
We leave them in there. All of our spirit barrel-aged beers, pop the bungs. Hopefully they come in really fresh. Hopefully they have a good amount of uncut spirit in them, and we get beer on them as soon as we can, as soon as they come into the brewery. So once in a while, I mean, we pull some liquid out. We run it through the alkalizer in our lab just to see what the spirit is, and then we actually take a few liquid home. Some liquid home.
You got to sample
Maybe
it.
have a little party.
Quality control.
Yeah.
He's asking if it's ever too boozy.
I mean, it's definitely boozy. I mean, it's
This
uncut.
one's boozy, right?
I mean, you can
Yeah.
smell this. I mean, as soon as you get this in your nose, you get those traditional rum, butterscotch characteristics. I mean, it's before you even get it to your nose. I mean, it's
I caught
prominent.
a buzz. Before I got it to my
prominent.
nose, I got a buzz.
Yeah. I think this is the liquid going in this was maybe 8 to 9%. And after a year, I think we're at 13.5 to 14% alcohol.
Wow.
Just from the liquid that was residual in the barrel, plus everything that's just condensed in the staves and the wood itself that
That's so
eventually
much.
comes out into the beer.
It tastes a lot. I mean, it's a bit like a cocktail. It's a rum drink, this one.
It's clearly, completely different than the last beer. Same base beer, like you said.
It's the same base beer.
But none of us would have guessed that if you said, try these two beers and tell me if they're the same.
It's distinct. It's pretty phenomenal. So what we're doing a cocktail series of barrel-aged beers. So last year we did one of my favorite cocktails we've been discussing. It's the Dark and Stormy. I don't know if anybody's ever had this beer. It's a barrel-aged rum. It's ginger beer. It's fresh lime peel. And it has a really beautiful mahogany color to it. So we actually aged Eldorado and another one of our barrel-aged beers, Velvet Merkin, which is an oatmeal stout, lactose stout. And we did an 80-20 blend, 80% of the Eldorado and 20% of the Velvet Merkin. We blended that together to get the color we wanted and the flavor, and then we bought, I think, 1,000 pounds of limes, and we hand zested those to get, I think, 150 pounds of lime zest and a bunch of ginger. Matured that for 24 to 48 hours. We kept tasting it every hour till we got the flavor that we wanted.
That's a long day.
I mean, it was a long day, a lot of tasting, an exciting day.
I feel like you guys are past that now. You can't. There's no machine Firestone can buy to zest limes.
Well.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. It's part of the love passion. We're zesting limes all day long. Yeah. And we experimented with dried lime peel, a bunch of other things. But I mean, as with everything we eat or drink, fresh is always best for what we do there. So we take the time, put some music on, and we create some fun stuff.
I like this.
Yeah.
I have another panel to do. I'm not sure I can finish the rum drink. It's heavy. Bevo believes in me. Get out of here, Jay. I'm not sharing it with you. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them. If you want to come, just kind of line up right here in front. I'll jump down and bring you the microphone and hold it in your face. But if you have questions about any of the beers or the barrel aging techniques that we're doing here, or the lager that we're drinking, I did want to take a moment, if we could have a moment of silence, please, for Pale 31.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It's gone. And it's his fault. It is our fault, isn't it? Yeah, we didn't drink enough of it. I did my fucking share, I swear to God, Matt.
You try to keep it alive.
Oh, I tried so hard. I had to go to the hospital is how hard I tried. And then I walked back here. There's a beer trailer behind this building. And what's plastered on the side of it? Pale 31. Yeah, like you did that just to fuck with me, Matt. Anyway, I just wanted a quick moment of silence. Have your lager, Firestone Lager now. Which is really good, by the way. All right, so any other strange barrels that any of you guys use? I mean, we had kind of mentioned even before we jumped on stage, like tequila barrels and, I don't know, because like for a while it was just bourbon, right? Like everyone was just using bourbon barrels, maybe some wine barrels.
Yeah, we've started experimenting just this year with port barrels, and it's fun. So all of this talk, we've talked about how we keep out oxidative flavors. However, like oxidation is what we're after. You want it the right way. And so that's the hard part. Like, how do you get the proper amount of oxidation and the oxidation in the right notes and not in the wrong notes? Because it can certainly go one path that is flavors that we do not find enjoyable, and it can go another path. And you're like, yeah, that's what we want. So what's fun is if you work with an inherently oxidative base barrel, then you are bringing in a controlled oxidation flavor. So port is inherently oxidized. And so when we're going to put a beer into a port barrel, we're able to kind of hedge our bets a little bit and know what we're signing up for. Just you're picking your ingredient again. So we're doing some stuff this year. We're moving from bourbon or rye into port, or from a mixed culture kind of base with some tart beer and fruit, and then finishing in port, to kind of bring in some of those oxidative characters. But particularly with like mixed culture, if you start getting oxidative, traditionally you don't get sherry, you're getting acetic acid, you're getting other notes that you don't really want. Because in the presence of oxygen, Brettanomyces is going to produce a lot more acetic acid, and that is going to make vinegar and not beer. But so how can we're kind of asking, how can we bring in some of these oxidized notes like orange wines or Jura wines, or wines that have these oxidative flavors into our beers, but not be acetic acid, and that's by just using a base barrel material as an ingredient that is going to add that oxidation for us. Okay. So we started playing around with that. We've messed around with some gin barrels as well. Gin barrels are tough. There's no rhyme or reason. I don't know why, like, consistency, it's kind of like with rum, with gin barrel. Some gin barrels are done in old bourbon barrels. Some gin barrels are done in old French oak barrels. Every gin's got a different spice in it, different technique, whatever. So we got some gin barrels from France that we've been messing around with already. We dumped the first round, didn't like it. Moving on to the second round, see what we can do and keep trying it out. But yeah, we're
try again.
Playing around.
That was one, like, why I asked if it gets too boozy. Like, we got those gin barrels in, and it had, like, still strength gin in it. And I remember unloading them with Blake, and we're like, oh, there's gin in there. Let's take a sip. And I almost threw up because it was like 150 proof or something like that. But like, the first beer that went through was way too boozy, like, just off the charts. Like, yeah. So, yeah. I guess
so if you're kind of planning on this oxidation and by nature introducing oxidation, and then you bottle it and put it on a shelf and I buy it, and it's already sat for maybe a year in your barrels, what should I do with it? Should I then drink it right away? Or, you know what I mean? Because a lot of us we buy these barrel-aged beers and we go, well, that should sit in my cellar until a really important occasion happens, which is when you're too drunk and you're out of beer. You know what I'm talking about, right, guys? You're like, oh, I was saving that for, and then you're like, fuck, I can't drive to the store. Or should we drink? You see what I'm saying?
When we release a beer, we're telling the consumer that it is time to drink that beer.
Yeah.
I think across the board for all of our beers, it's a happy thing when the beer lasts for a year or 2 years, but we don't know, like there's no way that we really can, particularly with all these like one-offs and things that we're just doing, little seat of our pants kind of thing. But like particularly with stouts, like those beers have the right flavor when we release them.
I'm glad we're dispelling this myth right now. Seriously, because especially because sometimes we pay a premium for these beers. You guys have held on to them for a while. And then we just think, I'm supposed to age them because it's high alcohol and it's barrel. But you've actually released it when you thought it was done.
Yeah, I think the same with our program. I mean, we did all the aging in the barrel, and we're releasing it when we think it's at its peak. But the beautiful thing about these things, like some wines, is they do develop character over time. But I think from the brewer's perspective, we put it in the bottle when we thought it was peaked out. And it's interesting because we'll get calls every once in a while, and somebody will have a 6-year-old, parabola, and they're like, "Is this ready for drinking yet?" And I was like, "Whoa, it was ready." Or they'll call me like, "Hey, I popped this one. I don't think it was ready for drinking yet. Can I get another 2015 to put in my cellar?" I'm like, sorry.
Yeah. No, you fucked that up. That was done. All right. We got some questions. Okay, Jay, I see you. This could get weird, guys.
Come on over. 2 loaded questions. I'm going to hold it.
A 4-part question.
Hey guys,
Hey.
thanks for the panel. It's going great. You guys look good. Blake, can I hold your hand? Because it's.
Here, you can take it. You're a professional.
So, oh yeah, now we're good. So Blake, you mentioned dumping that first run of those rum barrels. I'm curious if you guys have some stories about, because I think spirit barrels, it's a little bit of a wild card. Some stories about you got some barrels in, wasn't quite what you expected, and it went the wrong way, and then some maybe that went the right way.
Yeah, so we're weird in a certain sense. We only use whiskey barrels from one distillery, and for now, I'm not saying we always will do it that way, but it's been a variable so far that we've controlled. We have a very small barrel program, particularly compared to a big house like Firestone, and it allows us some little more freedoms, and that's one of them. We just want to get to know that ingredient, and I'm looking to develop more relationships with more distillers that I can get new barrels and start learning what those do. So we've had good experiences, generally speaking. We've tried to age some beers in those spirits barrels after the first run, and that has not panned out as well as we wanted it to. Particularly, we generally design all of our beers that go into spirits barrels for the spirits barrel to taste good once it's released. We don't really have many beers that or any beers really that we take that are regular releases and put them into spirits afterwards. When we have tried to do that, it hasn't worked out as well. Then we've landed in some soy sauce world. We've been waiting on some more barrel character. It hasn't really shown up. And then you find this kind of like two-pass or a curve or a graph, where that cross line is, where it's like, okay, not good, not ready yet, need more wood, need more tannin, need more, and too oxidized, now we're past the point. And for us, it's just been kind of a learning curve. It's been good to figure that out. We've dumped that. And then also looking at barrels, we learn more and more what to look out for. Cracked staves, cracked bung holes, things like that where it's like, oh yeah, that was definitely repaired, glued, that barrel definitely tastes more oxidized than every other barrel here. Okay, we'll make sure we don't get that next time. So we're relatively young. We just turned 4 a couple months ago. So in the world of barrel aging, where we were born like tomorrow, we're brand new. So it takes a few amount of runs and blends, and I think as a blender to kind of get that lifetime achievement award, we're trying to learn a little bit more. But yeah.
All right, we got time for one more question. But Beardy, you're much better looking than Jay, so I'm going to put you on camera. I want you to ask the question into the, it's right there. Camera right there. But you're talking to them, but you're looking at the camera. And do something ZZ Top-like while you're...
Yeah. ZZ Top-like.
I had a question about any other variables that you guys use to adjust the aging process. You mentioned temperature control. Do you adjust humidity or barrel rotation through the warehouse?
I'll answer quickly for us, but we do humidity control. Our first humidity control was pretty sweet. It was like a little home humidifier that we rigged up like a toilet float valve on to keep. We still have that. Good. It just keeps the water, so you don't have to refill the water every day.
You bought that new, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's available now for $49.95. Yeah, we've been humidity controlling from the beginning. I think it's pretty important. You keep, you're either going to evaporate alcohol or water, and Blake knows more about that than me, but we shoot for 70%. So, and then other than that, we don't top up. I think that's a critical thing, Some people do, some people don't. You can probably do it well, but we just choose not to. Anything else? Yeah? You guys?
All right, you want to finish up, Matt? No, you're done. He's out of here. You got some beer to drink. Ladies and gentlemen, Creature Comforts and Firestone Walker. Yeah. Thanks.
The Brewing Network.